have been looking after the pond algae I collected in the first weeks. My quest for algae biofuel seems a bit far off, so I have been exploring other species in the meantime. I began to think about how I was affecting an ecosystem by removing species from it, invasive or not. And I decided to speak to Swiderski, a local rewilding advocate and a trustee and director at the Climate Crisis Foundation, on his explorations into supporting local biodiversity.
Nature loves complexity. The more complexity there is, the more opportunity there is for different habitats, for different species. I mean, there are various problems with farming systems, just from the little I know about them, but one of the problems is trying to regard it as an industrial process while ignoring any knock-on effects on the wider ecology. The other is this sort of psychological human thing of wanting to control everything. Mm-hmm. We want to feel that we're in charge and that somehow we have agency in our fate. And part of trying to control everything is you try and control the environment around you. The other thing is that I've learned is that the natural state of things is very dynamic, it's very volatile. In other words, the sort of predator-prey relationships cause big swings in both populations over time, over several years, and some years you may get an explosion in some species, and then that has various consequences, and then other species will flourish and suppress that other species, and most of the time, people don't really know what's going on. They just kind of observe things. And the other thing that we all suffer from is this sort of shifting baseline syndrome, which is we assume that our baseline of what the state of nature is what it's always been, whereas there's more and more evidence now that our baselines are all completely wrong.
The sycamore tree is believed to have been brought to the UK by the Romans somewhere between 43 to 410 AD. Humans have been moving plant and animal species around the globe since the Neolithic period, just as animals have been moving them around on their legs, in their fur and feathers before then and still today. Sycamore spreads in this area incredibly fast. I heard it was possible to tap them for their sap, and as I was looking for a potential glycerol alternative for some of the recipes I was looking into, I decided to give it a go. I later found out it wasn't the right time of year. However, if you boil the bark of the tree, then you can get a little coloured sap to dissolve in the water. This can then be used to give a beautiful colour and some extra durability to a biomaterial. When thinking about how I could more easily break apart the fibres in the branches of a tree, I decided to use a traditional technique called retting. Retting is a process employing the action of microorganisms and moisture on plants to dissolve or rot away much of the cellular tissues and pectins surrounding base fibre bundles, and so facilitating separation of the fibre from the stem.
Anyway, that's a sort of long-winded way of getting to the beavers. And the thing about beavers is they are very much a keystone species, which means that they have huge effects on the ecosystem around them and the habitats for other species. They're very untidy, and so therefore they're generally very unpopular because people have this visceral desire to control the landscape, and beavers do the opposite. They just go crazy and leave a mess and chop down trees randomly and leave some of them there, and with others they build dams, they change the direction of watercourses, they dig new channels.
Alongside this exploration into our compromised modern ecosystems, I was still attempting to compile a materials library from what I could forage around me, without leaving too much of a trace on the ecosystem I was taking from. When it comes to any biomaterial, an often difficult factor is the binder. I needed to find a bio-binder from what I had around me to use in my recipes. The architect Olivia Page told me about the use of tannins as a binder and how it could be possible to extract it at home. I knew a lot about tannins from their use in natural dyes and mordanting, however never heard of them used as a binder. I tried a variety of recipes I could find online, including seaweed, water and methanol, a waste product from the gin distillery up the road, left to sit for 24 hours before evaporating off the methanol, seaweed and lye, which I used from the batch I made the other week, add water and simmer in a water bath for 40 minutes. This resulted in a satisfying glue-like mixture. And finally, seaweed and water simmered for 40 minutes. The simmered seaweed and water recipe came out as a sort of jelly, I decided to adapt it to a materiom.org recipe to see how effective it was. The resulting material was quite strong, hard and smooth, which let my imagination roam.
So the other thing we're going to do is get some pigs and let them roam free, make a mess in the pasture, because once again that stirs things up, creates for invertebrates, which then supports more bird life.
Author Jacob Michanowski notes that species are being swept away in an ecological catastrophe that has come to be known as the sixth extinction. It is invertebrates in general and insects in particular that E.O. Wilson calls little things that run the world that are facing the worst of this crisis. Everywhere, invertebrates are threatened by climate change, competition from invasive species, and habitat loss. E.O. Wilson says, the cause of species extinction are, in order of magnitude of impact on biodiversity, summarised in the acronym HIPPO. Habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution, human overpopulation, and overharvesting by hunting and fishing. Wild boar, like other pigs, spend much of their time digging up the ground with their incredibly strong snouts. This behaviour is called rooting. By doing this, they create a habitat for invertebrates. Wild boars were hunted to extinction in the UK at some point during the Middle Ages. Their population is now growing, mainly in the Forest of Dean, Gloucestershire, after some were thought to have escaped or been released from farms where they are being raised for meat. They have no natural predators in the UK, meaning culls are being carried out in some areas in a bid to control population growth. On a quest for a stronger material, I spoke again to the architect Olivia Page about the materials library she designed for the Porto region of Portugal. She mentioned that, when she mixed local clay-rich soil and lye, she got a material which could be cooked at as low as 80 degrees centigrade before it became water insoluble. We have a waste clay source close to my house, and other ingredients I found are calcium oxide from fired limpet shells and the other components of wood ash. What I have understood from the work of primitive technology is that the main component of wood ash, which makes a strong and durable cement when put through the right process, consists of calcium in some form. This can be up to 45%. Most of the other 50% consists of silica and alumina, materials that chemically react with calcium hydroxide to increase the durability of the cement product. These are all ingredients I have derived whilst foraging in my area. Now, of course, the other main element of the ash is sodium hydroxide, lye. So it would appear that mixtures of calcium oxide, sodium hydroxide, and silica, which is an ingredient kaolin is high in, make a reactive material which, after being fired at a low temperature and left to set for a few days, forms a strong, hard material which won't dissolve in water. I started with the simple mixture of local clay and lye. I did 4 tests, 3 of which you see here, and fired each at a different temperature, 80, 160, 200 and 280 degrees centigrade for 3 hours at a time. When I tested the samples, however, the only one which seems to have undergone some sort of significant chemical change is the one which was fired at 280 degrees centigrade, which you can see here to the left.
The whole basis of rewilding is kind of letting go, because nature is this massive complex experiment which is constantly happening.
Yeah.
And what we've constantly tried to do, and in fact many conservation efforts that I talk to people about, seem very targeted on one species or one outcome.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's completely the wrong way to think about it, because it's about allowing natural processes to occur, which is a very different approach, and it involves just letting go, just allowing things to take their course, and interesting things will happen which we hadn't foreseen.